Coming up on Mountain News this morning, protesters in Ashland marched yesterday even after the original organizers of the march backed out. And an Alabama man is making a 1,000-mile march to Minnesota. We hear from him as he made stops in Louisville yesterday. And as all of the protests are going on in the middle of a pandemic, we talk with health experts about how these gatherings could potentially further the spread of COVID-19.
Dedicated to Eastern and Southern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News This Morning.
Good morning, I'm Lacey Roberts, and thank you for joining me on Mountain News This Morning. Today is Monday, June 8th, another start to a week, and it's going to be a hot one out there. Let's go ahead and go to Brandon Robinson to tell us just how hot it's going to be, Brandon, and how good that weather app is going to be to have on handy.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one to have, not for rain or anything else, but just to track the heat for the next couple of days. So far, so good this morning on the cooler side, but that's not going to last too much longer. Above the fog, we showed you the WYMT camera outside the WYMT studios earlier in Perry County, but you see above the fog there on Buffalo Mountain, things looking pretty nice there. A nice sunrise on the way. Should happen here in about the next 15 minutes or so. I think it's at 6:15 actually this morning. I'll have to check that here in a second. But you see again temperatures across the board in the 50s and 60s as we head out the door this morning. So not too bad. The cool spot is Irvin now at 53. Everybody else there closer to the upper 50s. This afternoon, hot. 89 for a daytime high. Not as humid today. So again, when the sun's beating down on you, you'll still feel that 89 degrees. But really, we start to crank that heat index up tomorrow. So sunny skies today. Heat precautions need to be in place the next 2 days. And then the scattered chances for showers and storms possible as we head into late Tuesday going into Wednesday. We'll talk more about all that coming up in a few minutes. Lacey.
Thank you, Brendan. Protesters in Ashland marched yesterday, even after the original organizers of the march ended up backing out. The group marched to Ashland City Hall and stopped at Greenup Avenue, where they began kneeling and lying down over 8 minutes each to memorialize George Floyd. Those at the event say that they hope this demonstration and those like it across the country is the beginning of change.
Something has got to change. And it starts with us. And like I said, the generation before us didn't do anything to stop these things. So our generation are the ones coming out here to say enough is enough, and we're changing these old ways.
The protest remained peaceful and went smoothly, with roughly 100 people taking part. And one man from Huntsville, Alabama, is marching 1,000 miles for change, justice, and equality. And on Sunday, he made a stop in downtown Louisville. Stephen Going has a story.
Rest in peace, Terry Willis leading this crowd in a cry for peace in front of Metro Hall. Stopping in Louisville as part of a 1,000-mile march from Alabama to Minnesota, demanding change and justice for victims of police brutality across the country.
When I seen that video, George Floyd, it was, that hurt me to my core.
What started as a journey to the scene of George Floyd's death at the hands of police, turning into something bigger for Willis, a mission driven by his faith.
My God told me that I needed you to walk 1,000 miles to Minnesota, but the reason is I need you to stop in other places and touch these hearts before you get there.
Willis on Sunday visiting the scenes of fatal police shootings in Louisville, 26th and Broadway, where David McAtee died 1 week ago, and the apartment where Breonna Taylor was killed in March. Each step captured in social media posts gone viral, with dozens of supporters by his side.
That's what I do this for. That's it right there. The support, the love.
Willis, now more than 250 miles into his journey, shows no signs of stopping. No longer worried about the physical, he says he's just doing what's right.
Mentally, I'm prepared, and no matter what it takes, I'll get there. I'll get there.
Protests across the nation continue to spread a message against that police brutality. And, Terry Willis will begin his journey on Tuesday, and he's expected to continue that for 2 weeks. A GoFundMe page to support Breonna Taylor's family continues to grow. The fund was created by Taylor's aunt on June 3rd, and at last check, the total was more than $5.3 million. More than 180,000 people have made a donation, and the page says donations will go to Taylor's mother and sister, who are both missing out on work and sleep since her death. And while some people in central Kentucky are taking to the streets and marching against racial injustice, others are taking a different approach. We've seen a number of vigils to remember lives lost to police brutality, and we saw the 8 minutes and 46 seconds of silence on Saturday in Richmond, and it was repeated in downtown Lexington yesterday. It is how long George Floyd was held under an officer's knee before he died. Participants were encouraged by a collective effort to bring justice and reform to their communities.
What you'll see is people coming together, and I really do think that that is our best strength. Our strength is our diversity.
A group in Richmond also held a similar vigil on Saturday, where, like yesterday, folks quietly whispered the names of those who were lost. And protests across the nation continue to spread a message against police brutality and an end to systematic racism in our country, but all in the midst of a pandemic. Jim Stratman talked with doctors and protesters about how coronavirus is playing a role in those protests and how the protests could potentially further spread the virus.
For 9 days, calls for justice and change have filled our nation as large groups of protesters line the streets chanting names. All in the middle of a pandemic.
You know, what we're getting from COVID is we tend to see little clusters. We tend to see little hot spots.
Dr. Ryan Stanton tells me that he doesn't see a true correlation between the protests and COVID-19 hotspots.
I saw a lot of articles coming out like 2 or 3 days after the protest and saying that, look, the numbers are going up from the protesting. And it's not the case. We're not going to see a huge jump in 2 to 3 days or even a week. Where we've seen areas that have significantly increased have been areas that either, one, are very popular for a lot of people to flock to, or areas that opened up very early.
That's good news for protesters like Joshua Masalia, who told me that the threat of catching the virus didn't keep him away from a vigil Sunday morning for the lives lost to police brutality.
COVID-19 is going to be here for a little bit. Hopefully we'll get a vaccine and then, our scientists deal with it. But the people need to deal with this. We need to come out and force. We need to come out and force and vote. Put in people that we believe in who can create an actual change.
There was an interesting dynamic on display down here at the vigil. As one protester told me, they're trying to balance fighting 2 pandemics.
I think it's good to frame it in the sense that this is a pandemic. The deaths of black men and women in the streets is something that's been going on for a long time. COVID-19 is definitely a scary thing. I don't want to catch it. I don't think anyone wants to catch it. But when it comes to issues of social justice, that takes precedent, I feel like.
Dr. Stanton tells me that he expects to see case numbers rise in the coming weeks from reopening, but says new targeted approaches to clusters should take precedent over more blanket closings and restrictions. Reporting in Lexington, Jim Stratman, WKYT.
And in the past few weeks that we've seen a lot of those protests here in Kentucky, but on Saturday in Frankfort, it was a different story. A parade of cars drove by the Capitol showing their gratitude to the governor. People showed their appreciation for Governor Beshear through a parade of signs. Event organizer Sharon Kaiser says around 140 cars with about 400 people drove around the governor's mansion.
I hope it lifts him up. I mean, that is absolutely what we want to do. We want to lift up the governor, we want to lift up his family, and we want to lift up his dedicated staff that is working with him, I'm sure at times around the clock, dealing with this virus and now dealing with other problems in society.
This show of support comes roughly 2 weeks after a group went to the Capitol and hanged Andy Beshear in effigy.
Well, the forecast this morning, not too bad temperature-wise. We're looking at 50s and 60s across the board. Irvin at 53 is our cool spot this morning. I'm trying to find our warm spot. I believe it's Monticello at 64. As we head out the door with dew points, you'll notice it's not too bad of a feeling morning out there. We're in the comfortable category in most locations, even refreshing up toward Moorhead and some of those spots there that are in the 40s. I think that's the only one in the 40s, but you got to get to 60 degrees on the dew point to start feeling pretty sticky there, and that's right down toward Williamsburg and Monticello, Middlesboro, starting to see that. But so today, not too bad, but the humidity tomorrow. It's going to be much worse, though. The emoji cast, sunny and hot today. Heat precautions for sure. Hot and humid tomorrow as we approach 90. Some chances for showers and storms possible late tomorrow going into Wednesday as we see the possible impacts. Let's put it that way. I don't think we'll see the remnants. I think we see some impacts from what was once Tropical Storm Cristobal. Lacey.
Thank you, Brandon, and thank you for joining us on Mountain News this morning. More news is on the way. Coming up, as fears of a second wave of COVID-19 continue to grow, the U.S. is running out of the only drug known to help.